Good afternoon. I'm Dan Longo, First Vice President of Commercial Lending at Liberty Bank. Today's CBIA presentation is about 5 tips for your B2B marketing strategy, which will help you navigate the business-to-business marketing landscape. Liberty Bank is a 198-year-old mutual savings bank with over $7 billion in assets. We have over 55 branches throughout Connecticut and Western Massachusetts. I'm pleased to say that the CBIA and Liberty Bank have been partnering together for many years. We are very proud to be the series sponsor today, and I believe you're really going to enjoy our presentation today. So let me introduce Sara-Beth Donovan and Kara Mitchell.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you everyone for joining us today, especially following that snowstorm yesterday. Hope your weeks weren't too disrupted and glad to spend some time with you. I'm Sara-Beth Donovan, principal at Mintz Hoke, and been with the agency for quite a while now. I've navigated a lot of B2B trends and excited here today to help you do the same. And Kara, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kara Mitchell. I'm also one of our agency principals. I oversee our client service practice here with Mintz Hoke and have been with the agency for close to 14 years now. And like Sarah, have worked majority of my career in the B2B space. And so excited to share some best practices with all of you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So give me one moment to do so.
And we've included a few polling questions, so you'll see those come up intermittently throughout our presentation, and we encourage your participation.
Great. So thanks everyone for joining. I think today we're really looking to share some best practices with you as it relates to B2B digital marketing, talking a little bit about how you can both connect, engage, and convert your audiences. You know, the first question that we'd love to just ask everybody here that is joining us today is, are you currently investing in digital marketing efforts to support your business goals? About a minute more to see if we can get some of those responses in. Great. Well, it looks like we have pretty good response. So majority of you are, yes, investing in digital marketing efforts today to support your business goals. That's great. Some of you not investing today, and that's great because hopefully today we'll be able to give you some tips as you start to navigate that landscape as well. One of the things about digital marketing that makes it so great is its ability to really target very directly your audience, and it can be very cost effective. At the same time, a lot of marketers have used that medium to really cast a wide net on who their audience might be and let the technology sort of optimize on your behalf to try to find your audiences. And what that's done is it's really created a little bit of a black box at the end of the day, because you're starting to learn about the behaviors of your audience and what they're doing in terms of the actions they're taking, but you're not necessarily learning their motivations behind what they're actually, why they're doing the things that they're doing, taking the behaviors they're taking. And so there's some upfront work that needs to be done to be able to understand a little bit more about your audience, some planning that can help optimize and make digital work better for you so that you're not spending an exorbitant amount of money trying to chase those behaviors, but instead you're applying the technology to leverage a little bit more about what you know about your audience at the end of the day. And so today we're going to talk about 5 areas to consider. The first being bringing humanity to B2B. The second on the importance of engaging throughout the sales cycle with multiple media touch points. The third being outsmarting, not outspending your competitors. The fourth, we'll talk a little bit about how holistic brand experiences matter. And the fifth, we'll talk a little bit about how you can maximize event exposure. And so you'll start to see a theme through each of these today that it'll talk about how digital is critically important, but doesn't work its best in a vacuum. And so how it can be combined potentially with other areas to get the most out of that digital marketing spend. And we'll break down each of these individually. So let's start a little bit with the bring humanity to B2B. And as I talked about in that first slide, a lot of times we'll use digital marketing to try to understand more about our audience, but really what that's doing for us is it's really just teaching us a little bit about the interactions that they're making. And so it's critically important, especially in a B2B environment, that we look at our audience from all sides of who they are, both as people and as the title that they might represent in how you're targeting them. I think we forget about that sometimes. We forget that they're people and that they have very similar motivations to all of us. We at our agency here like to talk a lot about how your brain chemistry works. You know, classic brain chemistry for everybody. There are things that you crave. There are things that you're concerned with every day, and there are things that will comfort you. And when you start to think about your audience and you break down those three areas, it becomes really interesting when you learn a little bit more about their motivations in that way. And then you can start to build messages, and then you think about how you apply your digital marketing in different ways. So it's not just about the rational factors that they're looking at to make decisions when they're ultimately looking to buy something. It's those emotional considerations too. You know, does your title, the person you're trying to reach, ultimately crave a promotion? And how does your product help set them up for success to get that promotion? You know, there's a lot of different factors that come into play emotionally to try to drive a better, deeper connection with your audiences. And then how do you apply that ultimately into your digital marketing efforts? So the next question that we would love to ask everybody here, because we have a good sense of whether people are engaging with digital marketing today or not, do you feel that you have a good understanding of your audience's needs? So do you think about both those rational and emotional considerations? Are you thinking just about whether or not they're looking at your product in terms of the product features and benefits, or do you understand what's driving them from more of an emotional perspective, that crave, that concern, that comfort at the end of the day that ultimately helps them to make those decisions and draw a connection with your company or your brand? So we have a few different options here. You either know a lot about your audiences, or you feel like you could learn a little bit more about them. Do you feel like you know more than you think you know more than you really do? Or have you only really scratched the surface on understanding the depth of your audiences? So we'll give everybody a minute to answer. All right, I think we are just about getting those results in. So yeah, general consensus looks like just over 50, almost 60% of you feel like you could learn a little bit more about your audiences. And that's not, again, uncommon. I think oftentimes we get very close to our worlds every day, and we think about you know, what we are offering and what we need as a company, but we don't always put ourselves in the position of the people we're trying to reach and what they're ultimately looking for from us. And so when we think about that journey and the sales process that they go through, there's a lot that we can consider to understand just a little bit more about that process ultimately that those buyers are going through. And so we'll talk a little bit about number 2 here, which is engaging throughout the sales cycle with multiple media touch points. And so what does that mean? You know, we love to look at this breakdown by Gartner that talks about the distribution of buying groups and their time by key buying activities. And so oftentimes, I think we've all thought that, you know, especially a complex B2B sale is definitely a face-to-face sale. And so they're going to be the buyers ultimately that we're connecting with your audience are going to meet with us. And that's ultimately where the sales decision is made. And that's part of the process. If you look at this breakdown, here, you can see that 27% of buying groups and buyers are researching independently online. That's by themselves outside of any interaction with you. 22% are meeting with their buying groups, 22% of their time, are meeting with their buying groups internally. 18% of the time, they're researching independently offline on their own. You know, 16% of their time is spent doing other things. It could be talking with other people. Only 17% of their time is actually spent meeting with potential suppliers. And so when you think about that, oftentimes they're probably going to meet with 2 or 3 potential suppliers for your product. And so you have to divide that 17% by 3 or 2. And so that time becomes even shorter that you're spending in a face-to-face scenario with your potential buyer. And so when you look at researching independently offline or online, and you put those two pieces together, there's a significant amount of time that's being spent. Almost 50% or just about over 50% of their time is spent doing their own research, whether that's online or offline. And so digital marketing plays a huge role, right, in this journey, ultimately, that helps people enable that sale. We're not saying that that face-to-face sale isn't going to happen. It is, but how are you supporting that? How are you bringing your organization together from both a sales and a marketing perspective to enable that process, to help that buyer and that buying group get the information they need at the right time? And so you start to think about digital in a slightly different way, and you can think about that full journey. And so if you look at the 3 stages of the journey that somebody might go through, there's the buying stage, which we spend a lot of time in, right? That's ultimately what helps them get to the purchase. So in that blue area of the graphic that's on screen. But then there's also the product usage and own perspective of the journey, which again, I think oftentimes we forget about, and could still use digital marketing tactics and other marketing tactics to support. And then there's the advocate stage, right? That retention of that audience. How do we ultimately get them to love us and advocate on our behalf? As you saw on the slide before, a lot of the research independently could be connecting with other buyers that they're doing, and to try to understand ultimately what other buyers' experiences have been with your product or service. And so it's really critically important to make sure that we're carrying all of our digital marketing tactics through to the advocate stage as well from a retention standpoint. And so at different stages of the journey, different types of content is going to be so important to release. And so when you think about digital marketing, it's not just the demand generation on the upfront on the buy side, but how are we enabling that process? How are we enabling that sale? As somebody's thinking about their discovery or their needs assessment in the buy stage, they're having a problem ultimately that they're trying to solve. And so if your first message that you're releasing through digital marketing or other channels is going to talk about your product, they may not know that your product is the solve for the problem they have today. So again, it goes back to understanding some of those key motivations of those buyers. What are they working with? What are they challenged with? How are you ultimately connecting with them in a different way to try to ultimately try to connect in a way to show them that your product is potentially a solve for them? And then maybe on the advocate stage, that's where you're trying to get third-party endorsements and reviews from people that you can use maybe in the buy stage as well to help enable that sale. But looking at different stages of the journey and how you can engage and use that digital marketing in different ways to support that journey. So we'll ask a next poll question, which is, does your organization view marketing as an investment in your business? Or do you feel your organization sees it more as a cost of doing business? As you think about how sales and marketing can be coming together, does your organization think of it in that way? Or are you seeing it more as a cost of doing business, something that's ultimately more of a cost center versus a profit center?
Wow, that's great news.
That's great news.
And we're really thrilled to see this, and thank you, Kara, for bringing that question forward for the group. One of the things that we see as a critical element when we partner with many clients is those organizations that view marketing as an investment tend to be a little bit ahead of the game in terms of, their return on ad spend and what they can do in that regard. And one thing that's critically important to understand is budgets large and small can be equally as successful with the right strategic framework and approach. It's very rare at Mintz Hoke, as we think about number 3, where we're talking about outsmarting, not outspending your competitive set. It's very rare that our clients sit in the lead position in terms of their category as an ad or a sponsor spender. And where we're able to work with them to really differentiate them in the market space is by applying 4 rules. Those are the rules of creativity, innovation, strategic alignment, and partnership. And when we put those 4 things to work, regardless of the size and scope of the budget, we can scale a solution that starts to bring that investment to lead to even more marketing investment through their success. So as we think about the first that's paramount in that is strategic alignment across the organization, particularly where budgets are challenged, making sure that sales and marketing align becomes a very obvious conversation, but leadership needs to align as well. And everyone needs to understand that those investments need to be judiciously placed throughout the year. That can be a real selectivity to the trade shows and events that you choose to sponsor. It can be aligning to 1 or 2 key partnerships that are going to elevate your brand while providing halo through other marketing tactics. But when that strategic alignment happens, then everyone's head can nod in the same way and make the same unified decisions on where to apply the investment. And over time, ultimately, with that success, then that's going to return more investment back into the marketing funnel pipeline. Innovation, one of the things that we pride ourselves on at the agency is really being innovative and finding the white space for our clients to be able to own a segment of a category or to own a unique point of difference that they can deliver on. And when we're able to do that, it doesn't necessarily take dollars to stimulate the conversation, because earned media and shared media start to lead the conversation, because the dialogue is now so new to the market that you're the only ones having that leadership position, and you can position your team in a subject matter expert type of a role and gain some traction in that regard. That can then lead your financial choice of application to one of 2 schools of thought. You continue to amplify where the conversation has happened with additional paid dollars. So maybe that's boosting your social posts or amplifying in a search regard or with a few key sponsorships around a topic. Conversely, you can let that earned and shared conversation grow on its own and use your dollars to open new doors and new aspects of the audience that you might not have had success with through an earned or a shared dialogue. And that's where you would ladder back to that strategic alignment in which to make that decision of where to apply those resources. Then we think about creativity. Everything we do at our agency is born out of a creativity and an understanding that there's the balance of art and science. So much data is available in the world of digital marketing, but that can be both a blessing and a curse. Sometimes it can take you down an avenue where there's so much data, you don't know what to do with it, and you can't see the creative lens or the right cadence in which to make a move. We've had some clients that the first week of a campaign, if they're not seeing the traction that they had hoped for, they're ready to make a full pivot away from certain aspects of it. And we often have to remind them that by the time the campaign hits a market, they've been looking at it for upwards of 6, 8, sometimes longer weeks. It needs a little time to burn in. So setting those appropriate benchmarks and KPIs in advance allows everyone to look at the data and say, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? And when is the right time to make any refinements and pivots? And that will come in time. And it all ladders back, as we keep saying, to that strategic alignment conversation that hits the ground running for all of these things to work well together. One of the other things that's critically important is partnerships. We often see that the triad of search, social, and programmatic appear to many to be the digital silver bullet in B2B. They're very financially efficient, and many people think it's going to solve quite a few of their marketing challenges. And while they can, they often need to be amplified with a few key partnerships or content pieces that can differentiate, because they're very cluttered. So as we think about whether that's sponsorships with an organization, an association in your industry, whether it's carving out something customized that you promote yourself as your own content piece, or whether it's aligning to a few key media partners that you do a direct and specific application of a strategy that's trifold. That's a paid component, that's a content narrative, and that also puts you in a speaking and engaging position as they continue to host events to amplify your market. So it's really taking the dollars that you have that are available and allowing them to work as strategically as possible, but always having that halo coverage with a few key tactics like search and social carrying the water for you year round, regardless of business seasonality. As we think about digital, and I spoke about it not being the silver bullet, and Kara did as well, everything that we do as consumers of any brand, whether it be a B2B brand or a more consumer-oriented brand, we have multiple factors in which that influence the buying cycle in any kind of a purchase decision. Recent data suggests north of 11 touch points on average for a B2B sale to be transacted. And I think that goes back to the time spent slide that Kara was showing. It's a very complex sales cycle in which to navigate on the B2B side. So every contact with your brand, whether online or offline, needs to be unified and speaking that same language and having that same goal in mind. So whether you use an ABM program that taps a multitude of triggers in the digital space, or your sales team is very aware of everything that's in market and referring to that when they're engaging directly in those one-on-one meetings or those group buying committee meetings that Kara referenced, at events, and even as your brand ambassadors are just out in the world conducting themselves, we want to make sure that there's an alignment to everything in the mission that the marketing challenge has for going forward, and the strategic alignment, so that all of this is working together in tandem, particularly with more refined budgets. So our next question is, what is the one addition you're hoping to make to your marketing mix as we kick off 2024?
Natasha, I think we have a slightly different question there. Natasha's the real hero of this webinar today, navigating all of the polling questions behind the scenes. Let's give her a round of applause.
Yes. I'm so curious to see what the answers are to this open-ended question.
Sarah, while we're waiting for the answers, there was a question that came in to help define ABM, account-based marketing. Do you want to take a minute maybe to talk a little bit about account-based marketing?
Oh, sure, absolutely. One of the things that we see to be very successful for many of our clients is having a target group of audience members that they really want to go squarely after for their digital efforts. So that can be an account list that you're working on. It can be a series of types of individuals within an organization by job title that we can then go out and build a custom list for you. But really, it's that one-to-one direct marketing that can make your tech stack work really, really hard in the follow-up marketing. We've had some clients too who don't have an active list, but they know topically where they want to be. And in that regard, we can work with many of our partners through intent-based triggers to say, build us a list of people who have engaged online in this topic, and go at them from a contextually aligned rather than a personal, individual, or job title target. So we can have a many different ways that we can really refine the targeting. And it's interesting, we had a partnership last year where it was heavily digital through ABM, but offline we were able to also parlay some geo-targeting around events where we knew these individuals had registered to be as well. And it blended that online-offline mix to be very successful. So it's a way to be really efficient with your marketing dollars and minimize the waste that many other forms of media might bring to the table, regardless of budget size. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
We have some of those answers coming in now, which is exciting. We have things like better SEO, which is critically important. If you're going to have your digital marketing work effectively, that is really the first step for you, is to define ultimately what you want to be known for and what that key message is that you want to pull through from an SEO perspective. We call that relevancy in the world of SEO. And if you're not establishing that relevancy, you can't outbuy yourself to be in better positions. So you really have to do the work up front to understand ultimately what those key messages are that you want to be establishing yourself, which really does go all the way back to looking at your brand positioning and understanding if you know what your brand stands for, first and foremost, that there's clarity in that message that you're delivering. Then that plays not only into your SEO, but also as you think about earned media, like Sara-Beth was talking about, what is the content that you're releasing through some of your earned media or public relations channels to make sure that you're building that relevancy in a number of different places, a number of different media. So not just on your website, but it's reinforced in other places as well. Some of the best SEO you can gain is from some of that third-party linking and making sure that they're also talking about you in the same way that you want to talk about yourself. So a lot of really great opportunities that can come from doing the upfront work to establish some of that SEO knowledge and strategic planning, which kind of goes along with another piece that someone said, a marketing plan, first and foremost, which again, like we talked about up front, doing that upfront work to understand your audience, understand some of the positioning that we just talked about, that is critically important to make sure that then on the back end, you can fulfill and build a plan that's going to be as effective as possible for you. If you've defined your goals up front, obviously those are the things that are going to be the most important for you to make sure that we're building an accountable program that continues to let all of your organizations see your marketing as investments and not cost centers. And print media. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about print and kind of the role of print today?
I've had the good fortune of being in this career for over 2 decades, and I firmly believe that no form of media is dead. There is a place for everything if you've done that marketing plan, if you've done that strategic work. There is not necessarily a place for everything for every brand, but there is a place for every form of media right now. Print is interesting. Right now it's really struggling to find its footing. But where it has traction, you can have that rich experience with a very dedicated audience. I'll tell you, I get a few publications, both digitally and in print still to this day. I'll take a cursory look at the digital edition, but I'll sit there on Sunday with my coffee and really dig into the printed piece, that glossy magazine, the richer photography and things of that nature. So it really depends on what you're trying to do because it can be expensive, but there can be a place for it. I also love seeing somebody said, I believe, grow their social media following. And I think one of the things that we've guided a lot of clients is don't whisper across 4 platforms, have a conversation across 2. Really assess what your content model is and what your resources are, and make sure that you're doing the social media platform engagement well and not spreading yourselves too thin. So growing within a platform is equally as important to adding to your platform mix. Many of you, as this is a B2B oriented session today, I'm sure you've seen that LinkedIn has gotten a bit more ad oriented and a bit more personalized. It's interesting to watch the trends that are happening there. Video is working really, really well there. And we see somebody in there saying wanting to increase their video. I think that's a really smart addition to the 2024 media mix. And when you're building out video, one of the things we always guide our clients to do is model your shoot to think about it for both long form and short form. Attention spans, particularly in social, are really, really short. So maybe you're doing a 1 to 2 minute leadership video for internal usage. Think about how you can also be shooting that to 15 seconds for social promotion, how you might be able to do it for 30 seconds as a teaser. Even with the advent of addressable OTT television opportunities, the television video universe for a B2B audience is much more viable than it was just a few short years ago, because through addressable advertising, we can get right into the living room of a C-suite audience and know that's who's there. And now it can take something that probably otherwise would have been a wasteful purchase and make it very targeted. So the addition of video is to be commended, and I think you're going to see continued growth there.
With that last point too, Sarah, I think it's important to keep thinking about that notion of looking at your audience from both sides of what they represent. So both as people and as titles. If we're going to start coming into their living rooms at home to reach the CEO, a truly product-driven rational message is probably not going to be the one that's going to connect. That's going to feel a little bit off-putting in some cases. And so how are we building different messages that talk more to their motivations overall as people, that can ultimately help to build that brand loyalty and connection with your company? So there's a lot of ways that media is opening up new opportunities and really pushing us back to the need to do some of that upfront strategic planning. I see more personalized content here, just to maybe call out one more. And I think that's an excellent opportunity for ABM to come into play to support you in that endeavor. Also AI, we're seeing that be critically important, working with a lot of the tech platforms to be able to drive more of that personalized content, and make it more of an automated process versus more of a manual process. That said, if you can't afford an ABM platform today, you're not ready to sort of make that full investment because it can be pricey. There are more manual ways that you can dip your toe in and get the personalization process started. So don't be off-put by ultimately the price and the technology. There are definitely ways that you can enter into this. Like Sarah said with social, don't, whisper across 4 channels, do 2 channels really well. Maybe you can't invest in the tech, but there are definitely manual ways to get you started in this process to engage a little bit differently.
We do have a question coming through regarding social channels. I'll just read it for the group. We've struggled to get ROI from our social channels. It's labor intensive, organic, and hard to truly see a significant benefit. Thoughts? It's interesting, and this is going to get into one of the sections later in our presentation about events, which is coming up shortly. But one of the ways we've had some success is by correlating the social media to an event to really measure in a time-limited way how we've been able to correlate that over to possible demo engagement at a trade show or an appointment setting type model. One of the other things, we follow a rule of social media of the 80-20 rule, which is very common in everything, but 80% of your social content should be giving with only 20% getting. And so making sure that you're really appearing to be a voice of a community. That community can be your business industry, it can be an association that you're part of, but being a voice of championing the mission and the message of the community, less your individual brand, so that when you are coming in for that brand ask, it feels authentic and there's an application of sensibility to the platform, and it's not purely sales driven. That does make it challenging to directly correlate to ROI, but measuring, share, lift in following and things of that nature over time are another way that you can measure some of that success. We do feel that amplification with boosted when you have certain pieces that are really relevant to a broader audience is another way that you can start to grow your following, and that might be something you want to try. But agreeing with you, it is to do social well organically, it is an investment of time, resources. And many organizations a few short years ago thought it was something they could easily have an intern do. And what they started to realize is it might be the place that some of the most thought-provoking conversations in the industry are happening, and really needing to have the right people be available to provide the content, even if they're not fingers on the keys. It does take a commitment to that strategy and a commitment to the time.
Yeah, and to that end, we were with a client this morning, and they ultimately have resources that man their social media channels. They have 2 resources. This is a customer service facing type organization, and they have different levels of access for their customer service staff. They ensure that their social media team has the highest level of customer service access so that they can in real time solve challenges for their clients. So I think to Sarah's point, where we've navigated from interns to now highest level of customer service, if people are engaging with you on social media, they're expecting a response, and that dialogue needs to be opened up if you're going to be able to engage well through those channels.
We do have a few other questions in the Q&A that we'll address at the close of our presentation, because I think we're getting to number 5 right now. So one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about is really immersing yourself in an event strategy. In the B2B space, if there's one thing that we find to be a tangible generator of leads, is event attendance and activation. But it doesn't start and stop with the 3 days of the event venue. It's really a 45 to 90-day cycle that starts with pre, culminates during, and if done appropriately, has post follow-up that can be really rich and meaningful. So in advance of any type of activation, you can be promoting through your own social channels, encouraging your staff, your talent to be doing the same, making sure that they know who's going to be there and what the subjects are going to be. If you're going to be releasing a launch of some sort, doing some teaser messaging, starting to say very VIP, access is allowed, make sure you sign up and register and really build that excitement. But it's not just done online. You know, if we're going into a market, say, where it's going to have a lot of activity, we might be doing some out-of-home activations, some large-scale signage in a given market, some transit-oriented activations if it's a major market of mass transit and things like that. It can start at the airport, right? You can be in baggage claim, having signage encouraging activation of your event, or maybe you're doing a private event in advance or post, and you want to have people be encouraged to attend. So really making sure that 45 days out, you have a strategic application of how you're going to build up to that event attendance itself. Then obviously having your teams on site and fully utilizing that space, hopefully well beyond simply a booth and signage, to include for speaking opportunities, media interviews, and things of that nature. Activating your social channels, letting people know what's happening on the floor, as some organizations still have yet to return to in-person events from both historically safety reasons, but now often budgetary reasons. What used to be something you would send 4 to 5 representatives to, now maybe you can only send 1 or 2 members of your team. But making sure that everyone who isn't able to attend sees that social feed ongoing and active to know what's going on. And then closing the loop in follow-up with the things that you heard, positioning as thought leaders, not only for what your organization was there to do, but also what you heard for the community and the industry you represent, and having a position on where the market is going. So we've attended quite a few events for many clients where AI, regardless of the industry, is the topic of discussion. How does that organization have a point of view? No one's solved for it yet. It's very much something that's still being uncovered, but having a point of view, having come off of that event, is an interesting way to engage with the audience and stimulate further conversation.
Also, for many of you that were interested or asking questions about content planning, this events are a great way to really get some great video content captured. Think about it. In most cases, you're going to have either your products on display if you're a product-based organization, or some of your key leaders all together if it's more of a service-based organization. And so you can do a lot of interviews or capturing of content at that show that can be used both in post, but also used beyond post too, finding different ways to release that content. So it's a great way to sort of maximize that investment while lots of people, resources, or actual products are together in one place at one time.
I think we have one more poll question.
We do. If you're not polled out yet.
Has your organization returned to in-person events, conferences, and trade shows? We'll give a few more minutes to let the answers come in. And while we're waiting, just a reminder to feel free to put any additional questions that you have in the Q&A feature, and we'll be addressing those after we wrap this polling question. Great. Yeah, I think if we had asked this question a year ago, we were seeing more of a 50-50 split amongst many who hadn't fully returned to office in a full capacity and were unsure on what the landscape looked like, both from an attendance and from an exhibitor standpoint. It's nice to see that many of you have already returned. Most of you have. There's a richness. We're all here today digitally, and the virtual nature of this has made for a lot of content sharing and a lot of things that make our worlds a little bit easier. And when travel budgets become an issue, it's nice to have the option of both. But there's a richness that comes with the in-person events and conferences that can't be replicated. And we find that it's not just the networking sessions, but it's some of the intangibles that happen in person at these events that can really showcase the nuance of a brand. You know, we've had clients demonstrate product in a way that's unexpected, and it surprises and delights the audience because they leave the trade show venue at night and they return the next morning and there's a whole new floor installed. And how did that happen? And why are we able to walk on it in less than 12 hours? And so there's just little subtle nuances that can happen well beyond what we can do virtually. And we encourage you to maximize any virtual opportunities to share subject matter content, and then really engage with your audiences, because those who have also leaned in to attend in person, you often have a highly engaged audience. They've committed not only financially, but from an attention standpoint to be there in the room with you. And they're less likely to be distracted and more likely to be committed to engaging with your brand in post. So I think with that, we can go to the Q&A portion. Is that correct, Kara?
Yeah.
So we have a question in the Q&A. I'd love to learn more about actual ABM program databases. We'd love to take that offline. We've worked with a handful of different databases that provide various levels of scale, and we kind of parse out what's most appropriate for our client need state and budget. But we'd be happy to have that conversation. Many have a lot of commonality, and will bring one or two nuances of something that's very specific to an offering that they might have. So marrying the right strategic partner solution to the goals of the client is critically important. But we've had a ton of success in ABM across a multitude of different industries, from financial services to manufacturing to healthcare, and others I'm not even thinking of right in this moment.
If you haven't already learned, my key theme for today is, though, it's about the work that goes into it. So the platform itself can't solve for everything. There's a lot of upfront work that goes into making an ABM program be very successful. First and foremost, your data itself, and just ensuring that you try to cleanse your data as much as you can, to understand a little bit more about those different records that are in there, and then using that to drive really smart programs in through the ABM platform. You'll also want to sit and try to break down your journeys. And so understanding what that journey looks like, how do you engage at the journey, those discrepancies between where you are as a sales organization maybe in the journey versus where your customer is in that journey, and how do you close the loop between those two areas and use the tools and communications to try to close those discrepancies a bit more and bring your customers closer to you. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen before you can just launch into the ABM program. And that's where that upfront work can help you. If you can't go full scale into ABM, but you can only dip your toe in, that upfront work is going to be extremely useful for you through a number of different ways to execute against that.
So I think as I look, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. We're happy to give a few more minutes if anybody has anything else that they wanted to discuss. And I think, as you know, in close, Mintz Hoke has been a part of the Connecticut industry and supporting Connecticut businesses for over 5 decades. We're here to help you succeed. And so if there's anything that you'd like to discuss further, we're happy to take conversations directly offline, because we believe strongly that, you know, the success of Connecticut is the success of our agency, and we want everyone who's a part of the CBIA to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, so we have a couple of really good questions that have come in as well. So for an organization thinking about taking their marketing to the next level, or more appropriately, the correct level, how do you suggest that we begin? We're great at messaging and defining our culture, not so great at defining the correct channel and spend. That's a Sarah question on channel and spend.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you are great at defining your culture and your messaging, because I think the marriage of the message and the medium work hand in hand, and oftentimes that's forgotten. We do an initial immersion session where we would work with you to go ahead and understand that messaging and that culture and your business goals. And then we would look at the competitive landscape, try to find some of the white space, also lean into technology, and try to find ways that we can amplify what you're doing well already, and what we might be able to add to the mix. One of the hallmarks of our agency is we don't just buy and plan media, we make media. For every single client activation, my charge to the team is to make something that didn't exist yesterday. Because when we do that for a client, the client owns that, and that can be the differentiator of success, regardless of budget. And we'd be happy to talk to you more specifically about how to build a program for you.
And Liz has a question here that talked about what would be a general word of advice for a company with a small one-person marketing department, not uncommon, and what to focus on to be the most productive and make an impact. At the end of the day, Liz, I think Sarah talked a little bit about just following trends, I think can be really, really difficult, especially when you're a one-person marketing department. And so identifying upfront just a little bit more about what are your business goals? What is the organization trying to accomplish from a business perspective? And then stepping back to understand what can communications do to support those business goals at the end of the day. So how are we going to enable what the business is trying to accomplish through communications? And then you can prioritize from there. Okay, what might be the best way for me to engage with my audience to achieve that? And don't follow trends out the window. I think oftentimes people think I have to be on all these social channels and I have to do all these things, and you do not. So at the end of the day, taking a step back to really define for yourself what's going to be the most productive for you to ultimately deliver back to the business at the end of the day. And thank you for the kudos on our inclusive employment approach. It's very important to our agency and to our culture. If you've heard our stories, you know that Kate, who works with us, is a huge part of our organization. So thank you for that shout out.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. We have an anonymous question regarding targeting and SEM. How broad is too broad for targeting keywords in SEM? How would you advise to stand out while still remaining relevant to our brand? Couple ways to approach this. You know, buying a broad set of keywords can not only become cost prohibitive, depending on the category that you're in, but it also can almost penalize you in terms of, Kara was talking earlier about relevance. And Google wants the user experience to be a good one, and they reward for good SEM through good SEO. So making sure that you're not just buying words that you would like, but terms that are well represented for your brand and represented on your website from an SEO perspective is going to return you higher in the search return queue. The other thing to think about if you're not already doing this is, you know, the extensions beyond the term itself, buying phrases as opposed to words, making sure to negatively target things that aren't relevant to you, doing phrase matching. And some of those types of things can make sure that it is highly relevant and that you're only paying for those that really want to engage with your brand. So those are just a few tips, but really we've had a lot of clients who, you know, for example, they'll try to do competitive blunting and they'll buy their competitor's term, but if it's not represented anywhere within their website, and why would it be, it might actually never return well for them. And it becomes something that not so much penalized, but largely irrelevant. And there are ways to go after that in a different approach, but being really mindful to what you want to have happen and what the audience wants to experience with your brand should be in unison.
We'll give another 1 minute or two more just to see if any additional questions come in, but thank you very much for the thoughtful questions thus far. And hopefully we've been able to give you some things to consider and think about as you approach your day-to-day from a marketing perspective. All right, I think that's probably it then. So feel free, I think, you know, obviously you can reach out to us on any, do we have more questions? Nope. You know, feel free to reach out to us if anybody has any questions. Thank you so much for allowing us to join you this afternoon post lunch. I'm sure everyone's calendars got a little bit crazy today after having a snow day yesterday that maybe threw some things for a loop. So we appreciate you taking some time out of your afternoon to connect with us today and talk a little bit more about things that we all love to talk about. So I hope everybody has a really good afternoon and be well.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.